vibrating length of the string, it's easy to talk about the wavelength because it corresponds to the vibrating length. Okay, so the most common ratio, and the most harmonious is 2 to 1, the octave. Because the octave is the thing that sounds most like the fundamental. You know, it sounds the best with it, as we kind of talked about last week. After that, the most common ratio is the fifth. Fifth has a ratio of 3 to 2. Okay, so that's also 1.5 to 1. So if you're talking A equals 440, the fifth would be 660. Sounds good to me. After that, you've got these kind of diminishing order of pleasingness. And again, this is all out of the older books, Olson and Jean, so their definition of pleasing. 2 to 1 is better than 3 to 2, better than 4 thirds, and 5/5, and then there's some subjectivity. And I've seen that with the responses of the first week's homework. Some people prefer certain chord sounds of it. But what we're talking about is kind of like, there's a lot of musical history, there's a lot of ratios. You can't deny the fact that the major chord is vastly important in musical history. And so that's what a lot of this is based on, centuries of music. So the takeaway from this is that most of these pleasing ratios are expressed via 2 integers. And the integers aren't very large. Okay, and we'll see some more of that in a second. The small numbers are good in this case. And we're coming up with justification. Okay, so intonation, and this is, the definition I'm using. You may see other ones. There probably are better ones out there. But this will work. It's a process of adjusting or selecting the tones of a musical scale with respect to frequency. Okay? We know how to read music from last week. We know how to play it on a given instrument. Well, what frequency is that instrument generating for each of those notes? Well, that is determined by what type of intonation it's using. So it's a formula and a process for building the sounds we use. And we're going to cover it in detail because that's the kind of engineering course it is. Okay, so we're going to first look at just intonation, which uses intervals only found in a harmonic series. Now, I didn't cover the complete harmonic series, but I covered the basic ones. Okay, and also you hear the phrase setting the intonation or intonating an instrument. That's fairly common in guitar circles. And what that has to do with is adjusting the string length. And basically, when you tune a stringed instrument, you set the open string note by adjusting the tension. To set every other note, you have to adjust the string length to make sure it lines up properly. And that's intonating an instrument, setting the intonation. So that's how it relates. But we'll talk more about that. The guitar and bass and most fret instruments are actually considered equal tempered instruments, although you can adjust that via string pressure. Okay. Think about the most complicated formula we're going to get to. Very simple. Sense. 1200 times the log base 2 of the ratio of 1 to the other. Okay? So let's just do a quick one. Octave. 2 to 1, log base 2, that's 1 times 1200. So an octave is 1200 cents. And we'll see the usefulness of cents later. Cents are often, like if you look at a tuner, it's labeled in cents. And usually, you're in tune if you're within 2-3 cents, depending on what type of tuner you're using. So the nice thing about cents is that it's flexible and that it works across octaves. It's always ratios, right? So if you're high above the staff or low above the staff, 1 cent is going to equal a very different number of hertz, but it's going to be useful musically to talk about in cents, give you a way of comparing the notes. Okay, and they seem to make the most sense with equal temperament. I'm not sure if there was another similar measure that works better with just temperament. I'm not aware of it. Okay, so here we go. Complete scale of just intonation. So we've got a bunch of names, ones you will probably never see again. Unison is, same pitch. Then you get the semitone, the minor tone, the major tone, the minor third, major third. Those we should know from last week. Perfect fourth, augmented fourth, diminished fifth, perfect fifth, minor sixth, major sixth, harmonic minor seventh, grade minor seventh, major seventh, and octave. All right, octave 2 to 1, unison 1 to 1. Everything else some other ratio. Now we've got some of these low ratios, like I mentioned, 5 to 4, 4 to 3, 3 to 2. Those are the good ones. Then you get the 6, 8 to 5, 5 to 3, okay, 9 to 5. Then you get some hideous ones, 45 to 32, 64 to 45. Okay, and then what I did was I threw in, I like to think it's C major. It's easy. It helps you, keep grounded. So I just threw in the key of C. Well, where do things fall? If you were to play a C major scale, where do they fall? So what's the problem you see here? With the labeling the key of C and what we know about the 12 note names. If you were to fill in the rest, what would you fill in? Sharps and flats, right? So what's the issue now?
There's too many gaps.
There's too many gaps, right? The thing there is that in just temperament, C sharp is not D flat. So I'm already changing what I told you last week. We consider them to be the same now, and right now they are the same equal temperament, for the most part, of course. But in just temperament, they weren't. So you may have things, for instance, here you see there's only one space, whereas here there are two. Whereas in the Western notation we talked about last week, C sharp is D flat and D flat is E flat is D sharp. But it depends on the key. Which notes exist in which part depend on the key. And it gets very tricky and very ugly, and we'll see that soon. But the key takeaway here is that, you don't have that one-to-one. So it's important to know, you got to understand it. It won't affect us going forward because we mostly live in an equal temperament world. It may be that actually we may be hearing they're just tempered, but we still describe them as equal. Okay. So the major scale, just intonation. Let's go back to, forget about all the notes. Let's just go to the major scale. What's in the key? Unison, major tone, which is the same as the major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, octave. Okay, so these are all the same things we saw last week and how to build a major scale. Difference is now is I'm telling you how to compute it. So if you have 440, you multiply 440 by 9 and divide it by 8, you have the frequency for your next note. Right? This is how to do the homework, basically. You set up an array that is the ratios, you multiply it by your fundamental, boom, you got a scale. That's what we're doing. Okay. The other way you can do it all based on ratio to the first. You could also do it based on ratio to the previous. So the second, the same, the reference to previous. The major third is 5/4 to the fundamental, or it's not 10/9 to the previous. And then the perfect fourth is, ratio of 4/3 to the fundamental, or 16/15 to the major third. And what you see there is that the same intervals repeat after a while. And then it comes out there's only 3 different gaps between successive notes. Now, just a quick word, these aren't particularly attractive numbers, but that's okay because adjacent notes in a scale don't typically sound good together. So you're more, it's the fact that these numbers are low